Welcome, everybody. I'm just trying to help everybody who's here right now get in. Make sure everybody gets in. It looks like we are. So I might pause a few times. I know we're expecting some more people, and we'll see when they join us. So thank you very much for joining us for Sunday Live. We have the great fortune of having Sanvel Rubin join us tonight.
Certainly.
I start out each reading with a poem from somebody else. And I couldn't narrow it down, but Stan helped me narrow it down this evening. This one's by Gregory Orr, and it is untitled, but it's untitled and then he has a title in brackets. This is what was bequeathed us. This is what was bequeathed us, this earth the beloved left and leaving left to us. No other world but this one. Willows and the river and the factory with its black smokestacks. No other shore, only this bank on which the living gather. No meaning but what we find here, no purpose but what we make. That and the beloved's clear instructions turn me into song, sing me awake. It's by Gregory Orr. It's from How Beautiful the Beloved by Gregory Orr, of course, copyright 2009. My page here to Stan's bio. Sanvel Rubin was co-founding director with Judith Kitchen of the Rainier Writing Workshop, low-residency MFA at Pacific Lutheran University. His poems have appeared widely in U.S. journals such as Poetry Northwest, Agni, the Georgia Review, and most recently, Tar River, Hole in the Head Review, like that one, Two River, Into the Void, and Sextant Review. He's published 4 full-length collections, including There, Here, with Lost Horse Press, and Hidden Sequel from Barrow Street Book Prize. He lives in Port Townsend on the North Olympic Peninsula and writes essay reviews of poetry for Waterstone Review out of Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. Please help me welcome Stan. So glad you're with us, Stan.
Thank you all, everyone who came, and the millions who didn't.
We have more coming in.
I'm honored to see some surprising people I like a lot who are not graduates of our program, as well as some from there. I think I saw Sid Brammer showing up.
Yes.
On there, and she was a wonderful part of it.
So we have that question that we start out with, Stan, and that question is an influential book or books from your youth. And I know you said you might have trouble narrowing it down to one.
Yeah, I was quite a reader for a long time. I'm sort of sorry I lost that habit. I was a guy who, like many writers probably, who always had a book, and I had to have the next one ready. I'm talking when I was a kid, so I could go right into that one. And in truth, in poetry, the first thing that probably I could recall is being home on a quarantine. That's how old I am. They would quarantine you. You hoped for that from elementary school for something, chicken pox or whatever. And I read Child's Garden of Verses by Stevenson. I love them. A little bit later in junior high, there was a poem by A.E. Housman, and we had to do a report on some poet. So I picked Housman, and I really fell in love with him forever because he's clear and pure and can go very, very deep while violating rules that we all taught and learned for years, like you must have a specific image, you must have a show, don't tell. But thanks to him, perhaps forever, and then Yeats, I understood that sometimes a powerful poem that can be a little abstract, if it's beautifully done, can sink very deep and maybe never leave you. Then also, I was another one in a whole different direction. I think we had to memorize a poem in high school. And I memorized, for whatever reason, The Windhover by Hopkins. And I fell in love with Hopkins' density and sound. So those are some of the ways. In truth, though, and this is part of it's a small aspect of my poetry, but when I was young, shockingly young age, I was like abusing myself intellectually because what I wondered, I knew more about the world than any kid in my elementary school or anything. I mean, geography was my favorite subject, and I read incessantly things about the world, the youth-oriented things about anybody who lived in a different time. Any account of the reality of another time or place just gripped my imagination. And I wanted to be a foreign correspondent from a single-digit age. I read political columns. My goal was to travel the entire world. And although I did a little bit of interesting traveling myself and with Judith, never achieved that. I lived in 2 towns of 10,000 and less than 10,000. But we did travel the US extensively, little roads everywhere. But so that was what I read with great passion. And then I got into poetry this way. Plus, I'll add that my mother read me some romantic poetry. It was probably in a deeply Freudian way or something. She had an anthology from her college days, a famous one of poetry. And I remember her reading me some Keats and Shelley, and I wanted to get that anthology. So those things influenced me. And
yes. Well,
that's
that,
more than
that very first poem, that there are going to be some long ambling conversation for those of us here that may not understand.
Ask what black and white TV I saw or what I listened to on the radio.
Yes.
I'm a radio maniac even till this day. So I fall asleep listening to some of the same old shows I heard originally when I was a kid. So.
Yes. So what are you going to read for us first, Stan?
Well, I gathered a few too many, I'm sure, but they're ones I feel like reading. Generally, they're generally short, and they're mostly poems I'm waiting to come out or have been recently published. They're not all. And 1 or 2 of them are older, so I won't read every one of them. I'm going to start with one, though.
And some of the shorter ones, you're welcome to read them twice if you see fit.
This is actually an older one from a book, one of the prize-winning book. I'm just going to read it. It's called Creed, and it's about 16 lines, maybe. It's statements. Creed: in my religion, there are no celebrations. In my religion, there is only confession. You will have to kneel in your own darkness 24 hours a day. You will have to enjoy it. What is the reason for reasons, you will ask, and nobody will answer. Like an accordion, you will squeeze yourself and open yourself trying to find music. You will be penitent without absolution. You will have to enjoy it. You will discuss endlessly with no one the difference between purposes and promises. There will be no promises. I kind of threw that in to read. It kind of gives me pleasure. I don't write remorselessly, darkly or seriously. I have a darkness that I sometimes find funny. I have found myself laughing to myself at poems that actually might shock someone who's looking for rosiness and think this is awfully dark. And sometimes, because irony is one of my modes, and
yes,
voices are the way I work a lot. So I'll say more about that as you question me.
Yes. So let me ask this. We both get to this page here. We are all carrying around a magnitude of grief, or a level of grief, but just between the two of us, it can probably be measured in tons for the past couple of years. But do you classify that as Black poems, your grief poems, or your grief poems something separate? Is it separate?
I view poetry. Anyway, I'm trying to always wanted to make something. I wanted to put something beautiful in the world. That changed a lot. I love the fact that I'm still writing, thinking about how I wrote, revising, writing better than ever, I think, and looking back at why I wrote the way. You get insights about yourself as a creator, as a person. I like all of that, but I really have never been one to pour out my immediate emotions. And I think I probably was motivated for the first years I was publishing to avoid my own emotions, actually, to make something, an object out of them. And over decades, I've moved more and more to the voice having closer emotional connection to me. It's not always mine at all. And to using the voice as a key element of music, because music, as I just read the image of opening and closing yourself trying to find music, is a driving impulse in the things I make. It's not the whole of them. I can give you one right now you might recognize, the oldest thing I could read today.
Yes, please.
I used to start readings with this poem whenever I was reading in those days, decades ago. He plays vinyl, which will tell you about when it was, when still playing records was some weird thing. Then, of course, they came back among youth and others that were collected. And now I understand there's a little run on audio tape, hard to believe, but people, as they unravel and tear. So this is called He Plays Vinyl. It's a little musical thing, and it uses Fats Waller's line, any jazz lovers probably know from his tune Christopher Columbus. He used rhythm as a compass. He used rhythm as a compass. Short lines, kind of syncopated. I haven't read it for a very long time. The Red referred to here is Red Garland, a real staple, brilliant piano player in those days. He plays vinyl. Coltrane blowing up a storm with Red, the bass too heavy for the woman he lives with. The old conclusions of bone and brass crashing through the study floor like news of train wreck, interrupting what was going on. They say poems should be like this. Impulsively, he puts it on, lifting it from its torn cardboard jacket like old clothes not worn since youth and out of fashion now, but able to arouse. Oh, God Almighty, how what beckoned once and could still beckon now, despite the undulant, persistent hiss of time misspent. They say poems should be like this. That's an attempt to modulate the voice as it goes and kind of imitate almost the spinning of a vinyl record that we tended to grow up with. So there's one you may remember, because you did a nice broadside for me of that long ago, and I
It's one of the longest poems I've hand set type. Yours and Judith's were I wasn't sure whether I would fit them in the chase, and I wasn't sure what I was
long, but
the press was going to work.
Hand set, and I used to have that memorized and would say it before a reading. I often would say someone else's poems, often one I adore by William Stafford, but I'm not going to do that right now.
Yes. So what else?
Music, but I will say this, over the years, I moved from trying to make, and I thought I was pretty good at it for a young guy, a kind of object, a kind of spatiality. I thought it was a place a reader could go into and take with you what you want. And over the years, I've gradually evolved into dealing with the flow of a poem, and it's something I would say to anybody who wanted to know, that for me, a poem invents time. It isn't just prose, though it can be beautiful prose. Many prose poems today don't have the concentrated power and atmosphere of the best Robert Bly prose poem, for instance, or the French, but a poem has some internal music that may be subtle, holding it together. And so I've learned to use voice as a key element, not pandering to a reader at all when I started it, but that helped me get closer to home. And Judith used to tell me to make every poem matter emotionally. And I would start in the morning with 5-finger exercises, just seeing what I could do. She said, make them, they all have to tear your heart out. I will read a newer one. Poets who have mattered to me are legion, including some of my favorites are graduates of our own program. And there's many of them, Alicia Hoffman and Kelly Agadon and Kathleen Flanagan, and just on and on, who've been very successful, but also among my favorite poets. This one I've discovered and rediscovered and dip into regularly, Rilke. Somehow you can't not keep looking into him, even if you initially think he's a little soft or he's fey or whatever a word is, but he draws you back. And I certainly have collected many translations of Rilke, the sonnets particularly, and I go back to him. And this one mentions him. This was published recently. It's called Corrupted Sonnet 3. I play with sonnets a bit. I have a couple of them, one to Akhmatova, one to Yehuda Amichai that I like. This one mentions Rilke, and I do that sometimes.
Mhm.
And I call it corrupted sonnets. 2 stanzas of 7 lines each. It's kind of tough stuff. The list of names is rivers, and then the list of names is terrible illnesses that affect children of poverty and third world stuff. In this world, geography is destiny. In this world, geography is destiny. Einmal, Rilke's favorite word, once. Once we drank of sacred waters. Marilau, Yamuna, Ganges, Sitaram. The list of diseases reads like a poem. Cholera, schistosomiasis, giardia, salmonella. You were born to a mother. You must forgive. The darkest place you can travel is where you've already been, wine drinker, lover of silence. You who breathe yourself into all spaces and find yourself in any darkness. Did you forget who is your brother? Who is your sister? Swept with sorrow.
Beautiful, Stan.
That's a dark thematic, and my pleasure that it gave me was just being able to do it and control it. But yes, the emotion connects to me when I say, you're the one, it's also me I'm talking about there.
Mhm. Well, many of the poems that I've read, with seeing the links on Facebook, or that you've let me know about, such control, such depth and beauty, and there's that blackness, that grief. They've knocked my socks off every time, and the comments that I see that people share, it's just beautiful, beautiful work.
Well, I
And that's a lot
appreciate
of
that.
that.
And I will say, I have had many that justified something you wrote about trying to get intricacy. Poems have to be clear. It doesn't mean their meaning is simple. The
Mhm.
words have to really work as the words are supposed to be. Not that anything you want that word to mean, but the poem itself could be shifting and challenges people differently. I've tried to get clearer and clearer. One of my favorite poets I dip into regularly for years is Jack Gilbert, who has the gift of that kind of immediacy. So I love all kinds of poetry. I'll give you a much more recent one of a different style if you're up for it.
It definitely. I have a question for you
Go ahead,
first.
ask the
Comment
question.
about Jack Gilbert made me think of it. So we all have influences. Some influences last, for a poem or a book or whatever. Who has been a lasting influence for
Oh,
you?
thank you. I really had my head blown off. I'll never forget sitting, you may have read something I wrote online about this, sitting in a subway in Philadelphia, rattling with the subway,
Mm,
commuting to college and opening, or with high school maybe there actually, and opening The Man with the Blue Guitar by Wallace Stevens and reading it on the subway underground. And it destroyed me. I didn't fully make sense out of it, but it was beautiful and there was thought in it and it takes you somewhere and it's musical. And
yes.
I've been a Stevens, he's in me forever. I published something in Georgia Review about him a year or two ago.
Mhm.
And also, um, in my era, T.S. Eliot was a force. And quite possibly, if you had to pick something, you can't. The Wasteland would still remain as the one greatest poem of the 20th century in the English, but that would be because of how influential and earth-shaking it was.
Mhm.
But his 4 quartets with their delicate, beautiful sound. So he matters to me. When I won the English prize as an undergraduate, they said, we're going to give you 2 books inscribed to you. What do you want? I immediately said the collected poems of Wallace Stevens and the collected poems of T.S. Eliot. Dozens and dozens of other poets from many cultures, needless to say, matter to me, but that's a good question. I'd say Stevens immediately is the one who stays with me. Whether I forget him or remember him, he's behind that. And the reasons I understand are the mind matters, and yet you can make something beautiful that is a way of thinking.
Yes.
And also, he wanted poetry not just to be of this world, something that got him a lot of trouble, but also my poetry isn't just commentary on this world, though I think all poetry is in some way. So that's this longer answer. I talk a lot, sorry.
Yes. No, no, it's everything's perfect. This is just what I had hoped for. And I believe that at least for me, and I was going to ask to see if it was for you, that experience on the train reading that,
Yeah.
those experiences physically change me. I'm no longer comprised the way I was before. I can't see the world the way I did before. I can't walk through or breathe the same way. And I'm wondering if you would describe it that same way, or if you have other
Well,
insights.
when you're reading for the first time, the stanzas and changes he plays in that long poem, and you're in a subway, and when you get out of the subway, you're like in North Philly or something. There is another whole world of words that are not just describing, which can be very powerful, describing exactly where you are or advocating something you believe in, but something else words could do, that he is probably the greatest who ever did that thing, because he created another kind of space. The mind is alive, music is alive. I personally think, having read it and written about it last year, but also read it over and over at times, the idea of order at Key West, which is endlessly rich. Somebody did a whole book on it, stanza by stanza, a whole chapter. It is probably, in my mind, nothing's the only thing, but it's probably my vote for our most sacred meditation in English. It deals with everything about reality. It makes it real in front of you. It's an amazing poem. Sometimes poems are, I've tried a lot for clarity. I've told students endlessly, you can have a complex poem or structure, but it has to be clear. That is, when we read it, we're not just, the poem knows what it's doing. And I think a poem invites you back into it. We all know that it doesn't just end when it ends. You need to reread it. And he's done that for me over decades. So has numerous other poems, but Bill Stafford, I memorized long ago in the East, his poem Ask Me. And, you know,
Yes.
I say it to myself, I say it to others. Sometimes I never say it the same way twice. The genius of that poem is it's polyvocal. It holds a lot in simple, clear language. So I've been striving for that kind of clarity, my version of it, for decades.
Well, what I have been reading, Stan, I mean, they are absolutely beautiful, and they are there.
I can't see why to
that
make
clarity
them.
and complexity.
Somebody I knew who's a prose writer of note saw a book, one of the earlier books I did, and said, "Oh, I liked your book. I knew you were," or something I had done that said, I thought you were just an elegant lyrical writer." Didn't interest her. But I take elegant as a compliment, but I don't, my idea of the lyric, I used to say, I'm a lyric poet. That did not mean anything old fashioned to me. From the minute I started writing, I knew that words aren't the things, they are things. I knew that meanings shift. That's the space I think lyric poets work in. That meanings shift and connotations move, and they move in context. So, but there is a musical quality, a concentration, and a desire in whatever form. I put some of them into prose looking, to
Yes.
have it cohere and have a kind of center that you attracts the reader without the reader knowing it. That I
Yes.
put something in there that I can't even, that I recognize as in my gut, somehow. So that's, anyway, enough of that. I'm not Hemingway.
So, so please read some more poems.
My work has, I've published hundreds of poems. I probably had thousands rejected. I never really multiply submit. Nothing I would ever recommend to students, but I'm not starting a career, and I follow my old style. I like to see if something will get taken. And so anyway, one of my collections has a fair, that's being looked at, but nobody's decided to take it, has a fair number of more intellectual poems, in the sense that there's a section where composers, classical composers, matter by reference or by thematic. And that's another difference I want to mention in my writing. When I started, like very many of us, particularly the men I knew, male writers, then I was heavily into jazz. I related, for decades, I related my poetry to jazz because I was writing in the moment. I had such a busy life, as many of us do, you do, family, teaching, everything. I was alive in the moment, the words were alive in the moment, and I related it to jazz. For the last almost 2 years, right through COVID, my house has been filled with classical music, which I always loved and listened to, but it was never my obsession. And it really is what I've been writing to and from a lot. This one is called Don Giovanni, which could just be the womanizing male, or it could also relate as it does here. And I subtitled it For Mourners of Dying Animals, which I only did that to submit it because I don't like putting subtitles that give away that kind of thing. I like starting somewhere and taking you somewhere. It feels perhaps spontaneous, and I like being in control of that. So, I mean, what's the point of making if you don't learn better and sharper ways to make? Don Giovanni. Listening to the overture to Don Giovanni, I realized I'm no Don Giovanni, which is fine. I'm not Mozart either, which is sad, but some things have to be accepted, like divorce and the death of my second wife. You have to understand the level of happiness that is yours. I'm not a composer nor a concert pianist. Usually that doesn't make me cry. What does is watching the cat's tumor grow while she recedes from life and me, sliding under the bed and staying there for days on end, not eating, withering like my old dreams of greatness, which would have been embarrassing to admit once, but now are fuel for flares of laughter on the right occasion. I can laugh at myself, a gift of time, or a surrender to it, but I can't laugh at the cat who still draws my sadness, my pity, my wish that everything I once loved will survive.
Beautiful, Stan.
I like that. I do get pleasure when I think I did something well, and we all know what a surprise it is. Sometimes you have to work hard, but I will say that's an example of a kind of, call it art, that I enjoy, which is you start somewhere in a spoken voice, and it goes through changes. I'm really a kind of master, I think, of one sentence poems. Sometimes people have praised it, but I've learned that that doesn't get you real far, because I make so many changes, turns, and syntactical moves that they can be followed, which I like, but they can't be emotionally responded to the way I responded. So I've learned that too. I do think a lyric poet, the joy, the pleasure of it is everything matters. I was starting to say earlier, time begins, lyrics reinvent time. The first word, the first syllable, the first line, have a density, have a kind of musical weight, and then there's accents. Of course, it's not meant to be overwhelming, but it helps structure the poem acoustically, and that matters always a lot to me. So this one starts listening, and then it ends with that long, but I can't laugh at the cat who, and so I go from listening to Overture Don Giovanni, I realize I'm no Don Giovanni, and then I end with something, I move it to something kind of very meaningful to me. I like those changes. So the space matters, the timing matters in a lyric poem. People know this, but it's what I think are the elements of the art. The spaces, the endings of lines, all that stuff. And when all of that was alive to me, that's how I really became somebody who thought it was worth working at this stuff a lot. And I will say in junior high, I had my typewriter. I would go to the basement, high school, I would go to the basement or kitchen and sit there typing endless versions of poems long before the computer. I think it was before electricity. And I used to double date with Edison, So the thing is, I remember typing and typing and typing. And I did value them. I thought they're precious, all the changes. It's much better with a computer. You can even save versions. I go back and cut versions when I think I don't need extra ones. But before we moved out here, I discovered a couple of cardboard boxes of pretty old poems, piled up, old typed manuscripts. Judy wanted to get rid of them, and it was easy because our cat then pissed on them.
Oh, no.
which is kind of the judgment of the cosmos or of nature. So instead of going back through them and thinking, this was great, why don't I? They just went. I like the past being gone, so I could,
Yes,
nobody would have moved them, and I wasn't going to move them in our car.
right. The sifting and sorting is much easier. Do you have any of them from that time when you were typing?
I may have a few around. I think I
I
discovered.
want to see them the next time I'm in Port Townsend.
Oh, there were thousands. They're gone. I actually,
If you
I
have
don't-
a few, I just want to see them.
I might. I think I ran across a couple. They were, and I do play a lot with form of what it should look like, and that's a great thing of being a lyric poet and having computers. I used to always tell students, if you naturally work with short lines, great, that's probably your thing. But try a long line just to see what happens, and vice versa. It opens up so much to do those games. All of you experienced poets and teachers know that. And those are tricks that matter to
Yes.
students. There's no secret. Those are ways of working. I write a lot about birds, which our dear friend Holly uses, and great, one of the great writers about. And she'd be surprised that I have flowers and music and all sorts of stuff, and history. History occurs.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It relates to teaching. So you've mentored many writers over
Yeah.
the years. And is there an experience, and I'm trying to let somebody in and my mouse isn't working, Tina Schumann's hopping in. So you've mentored many individuals. Is there an experience where you were mentoring that really stands out, where it either changed you or is memorable?
When I was mentoring, well, I mean, I have a strong personal feeling as well as an ethical desire not to single anyone out, but I will say, and I've told others, that a magnificent final experience, I would only take one student to mentor. They may not know our program was designed in many ways I won't go into because I would talk till the end. But one of the things, it was for adults, and it wasn't going to tell anybody how to write. And the mentorships, usually our mentors had one person to work with or two. Occasionally someone had three and one didn't and could handle it. So it was intimate like that. And I always could take somebody. And my last year, there was a wonderful poet I'd worked with unofficially who had me on the list. And I chose not to work with her in her gorgeous thesis, and she's published so much. But I chose a first year student, so I will mention her. And that was Emily Holt,
Mm-hmm.
who was in a way completely new to everything. She tried all three genres.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote some of the absolutely best critical stuff I'd ever seen among students for many years. And so working with her reminded me, you may have been there. They had me do a reading when I was leaving the program and kind of in Judy's honor. And she was the one that introduced me. It surprised me. She stood up in this nice dress and introduced me. What I remember her saying was, I had sometimes 2-hour conversations on the phone with him, and I almost never understood what he meant. And one of the reasons is when you're dealing with young talent, that much ability, you don't want to tell them what to do. So it reminded me again, as I was leaving the active game, which I miss, that you need to remain open. You don't tell somebody how to do this, how to do that. You might show them possibilities, send them to other writers, but you have to see what are they really doing. And she was a brilliant experience. I loved that final choice. And of course, she published this year, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, I guess it was just a brilliant book, Though the Walls Are Lit. A gorgeous original book. She's really Irish, though born in California, and it's very, very Irish kind of material. It's a lovely book, Though the Walls Are Lit, which is actually from an old hymn. And so I got that trade-off of seeing that come out. And in fact, I was asked to write a blurb for it, which I was delighted to do.
Thank you for sharing that.
So that's the story. Well, I didn't single anyone else out, but they were all amazing. And especially
and a 2-hour conversation with you, you're just getting started, Stan. That's just like
I won't. Well, I actually, believe it or not, when I was a young guy and a young man, my main mode of encountering people was listening to them. I wanted to know what is the world to you? What do you do? Why were you there? Who are you? How people what makes them tick, how they think has been essential to my imagination forever. I'm not a black and white person on anything, including dogmas, ideologies. I want to know what the human being is, but I must say in recent years, I've become quite a talker, and I kind of hope it isn't because I got too old to think I can learn anything from anyone.
I don't think so at all. But I want to hear some more poems. I know we want to hear some more poems
I'm
too.
going to read the next one that's up. It's very recent, hasn't been taken anywhere. It's called Mountain Irises. I did it for Judith, and I endlessly worked every day. Normally, I can spend hours even until I don't realize it's 4 or 5 o'clock. I didn't get out of my pajamas. It's not every day, but many days I have the luxury of doing that, and I'll revise old things, work things that are still hot, and all of that. This one may be done now. It's in one line that's broken each time. The stanza is like a line and then indented line on line. Sentences. It's a spring poem. It's entirely positive. Mountain irises. She loved irises. Incarnation is messy, but spring takes the cake. Wake with a pain in your belly, head stuffed with pollen. Feel warm blood spurt through your arms and legs like a juice that just makes you thirstier. And then there's the cost of trying to ignore the call flesh makes on spirit. You promise yourself just this once to resist. The sweetness of fresh cream, the silk tongue of air, the pull of skin on your skin. This sun. Take in these flowers whose color winces the naked eye. Blue, deep blue, the symbolism of heaven. Love what dies. Maybe it's done.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Thank you. I'm glad I can take pleasure in reading some of them. I think somebody did a nice thing, it's Joel Johnson. I won't go into the story, but I'm not a joiner normally. I'm in a few groups now, and I'm in a poetry group locally. I sometimes host and stuff. I'm not a joiner by nature. And anyway, I'm going to just read this one, which is Jill had me out there when the Orca, for love of Orca, came. In spite of not being somebody who gives to anthologies, I got to get a poem in there. It was one of the times where I sat right down and wrote an entire poem, which is not the one I'm going to read right now. I probably should, having said this, if it's in front of me somewhere here. But I'm going to read this one called Skin. But what Jill did is, when I was over there, she took me to the library to the poetry group she participates in, which is not a critique group, they share poems. And she pulled out her computer and had me read the poem I'd written for the anthology, which I hadn't even remembered.
Wonderful.
And when I was done, I said, I'm going to tell you guys something you probably won't see a lot because I'd forgotten this poem. I like that. That's a damn good poem. You can hear somebody say that because, out of surprise and authenticity. So I will read it. I guess I have to read it now.
Yes, you do.
Whether you agree with that judgment. And I had it in front of me as a possible read in the anthology, but as I moved everything around to get this backdrop, I sort of messed up where things are. So I guess I'll just pull it.
That's okay. You can have a minute or two.
No, I want to just get to it. I spent enough time on these other things. And I know it's right here, but I'm going to pull it off my list. You asked about my old thousands of poems. I have a folder of poems I've written since maybe 1990 called Poems to Send. And then I have thousands more under recent poems that are since I moved out here. And I'm now looking for the Orca's poem. And it starts, I have many poems actually that Orca's appeared in. Maybe it's only since being here.
Mhm.
But all right, I can't even do it. I just messed myself up because.
Okay, I'll make an announcement.
No.
Coming up on May 16th, we are going to have a reading in honor of Sam Hamill.
Oh, God, that's nice.
Wednesday will be 3 years since Sam died. And a group of us are getting together and doing a memorial or a reading in honor with some of his work, some poems we've written for him. That's May 16th. Just let me know when you have it, Stan. And then
Oh, I'm not even going to do it, but after having said all that, it's criminal of me not to. I didn't really plan to do it. And
whenever you're ready.
when I moved everything around, I seem to have lost it. And the way life is probably right next to me. So I'm just going to read the one I was going to read.
Okay,
That's
wonderful.
an interesting poem, which starts, call them by their proper name, killers. And then I sent the second half separately too, saying, if that's too harsh for you, do the second half, which is, this is called, this is a poem. I like to think my poems are, and this is where my affinity for Sam's translations and for many of the Japanese and Chinese and Zen poets I also have next to me comes, but I like to think of my poetry as poetry of being, and really what it is. Here's a one called da 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 da. Look, I'm being silly. This one's called Skin, and it is, in its own way, it involves the subject we talked about morning, but I'm listening to Beethoven. It's called Skin, S-K-I-N. I'm still playing the title. I'm listening to Beethoven, all 32 piano sonatas. I'm sitting alone in a dark room, listening to one after another. A delicate and powerful rain I feel on my skin. In this dark room, music does not heal grief, as a famous line of Shakespeare almost suggests, depending on how you read Shakespeare, music, and grief. Grief is innocent because it's always new every time you feel it, the way I feel this music falling on my skin. It makes me think of her, how I miss her being here, in which case I would not need to fill my skin with music to chase out grief. But the grief and the music merge, and together each becomes more than the other and permanent. So I finally got to that after all the building up of the other poem. I couldn't even.
Yes, no, that's breathtaking poem.
This is what you always do to yourself. When I moved the table at the last minute, I completely messed up whatever spatial organization, you would never call it that. So ask me a question.
Ask you a question. Well, I was going to comment that I mean, I've been working on some of those love poems, but they're grief poems. You know, grief is the heaviest love we carry, and I think that
Right.
your not lightness, but lightness in touch, or maybe deftness in them, is just I don't know, lack of a better word. In general, I've been up too many hours. As I told you, we've been without sleep for 2 days as we stayed at a hotel where there was a ruckus. So my words aren't coming to me right place I want to. No, I mean, it was a good break, but a simple magnificence, a simple, I mean, it not only speaks to the simple humanity of it, but those words carry the weight of what I feel. I mean, you are touching me at that same level that I'm experiencing that grief that I have. And when I don't know quite else how to express it, but they are so relatable. They are not just the grief that you carry, they are our grief. They're what I'm experiencing in my walk too.
Well, I got a number of them, and I put one into a prose looking form, and it got taken by Agni.
Mm-hmm.
It was a delightful thing. And anyway, here's a piece of my history poems. This one was recently published in Sextant Review out of the Northwest Arts Center. And it's got a heavy subject, but evading Hitler. I have a glancing, paranoid, passive-aggressive relationship to history. History is real to me. It always has been.
Yes.
Evading Hitler. It's in couplets. So the way I do it is to fold my family into a space as small as my breath and hold them inside my body in the warm pouch of my belly, in the cold pockets of my lungs as we leave together, in the thinnest hour of the night, when nobody's watching, or if they are, they can't see us pass silently as shadows down the secret alleys where you can escape history by becoming invisible, yet your loved ones remain intact, like jewels in an intricate setting. There's no need to worry, so long as I keep running down the unlit alleys where there's nothing to stop me, except the rats and the bodies we leap over as easily as the moonlight sweeping my hair. So it almost seems we're flying. And you know, that shows you how it's got a heavy, starts with the word Hitler. I think that does represent the kind of, yes, I want it to be clear, but it's complex emotionally. And so I often have an irony that's speaking against itself. There's no need to worry so long as I keep running, you know, so it almost seems we're flying. It's an escape poem without an escape, and that's kind of my relationship to
Yes.
history. So I do a lot of halfway and subtle gestures. I must say, speaking them aloud is a different kind of challenge from putting them on the page. And I love living in an era where so many poets, younger especially, are doing spoken word and performance things. It's honors.
But Tina Schumann said, so masterful, Stan.
Oh, Tina knows I love her work. I mean, in terms of pleasant surprises, people who came in good, Sonnet already published significantly, and who left, who transformed themselves too. I always loved her work, and she just made it better and better. She's one of the best.
Yes, fabulous.
I can give you my one of my truly environmental poems.
Please do. We have, it's about seven till. We have time for a couple more poems.
I got to give you then, I'll give you this, which is tightly structured, and I'll give you a more amusing thing, I hope. Maybe end with a short thing. This is called Burn Path. It's in 5 numbered small stanzas that have 5 lines each. And it comes originally from an experience of being somewhere in New England where we saw a burn people had done long ago. That nothing, you know, when the forest fires burn, everybody's unhappy, but really the forests regenerate too, and species regenerate. But here, it was just what I'm describing. It was complete death. I mean, you don't raise that much in parts of New England anyway. It's not the most fertile. This is called Burn Path. 1. Fire worked its way like a snake around everything. The field of fruit to be swallowed whole, not an injury. 2. Walk the long way around where the scars still are, the marks it carved that can't be removed, even by time. 3. You can imagine alien craft were here, leaving an indelible message we have yet to interpret. That's almost true. 4. They scorched the earth to abolish what they did not want to grow on property they considered theirs. Their names have vanished. 5. Kneel and grab a handful of what feels like coal dust. Run it slowly through your fingers. You are a coroner exposing a corpse. You are counting down. I will throw in here, among the many compliments, that you are one of the happy surprises, because you know that I wanted you to be admitted on the idea that you had a serious and looming interest in graphic art. And I remember saying, she will contribute that to this program. And before you left, you did. You were doing broadsides. You really had mastered, you became a great artist in that. You know, I'm going to read one that's wholly different in tone. And it's me being ventriloquist and playing my ironies. Polonius's advice updated. To thine own self be true. We all know that. And if you know that in Hamlet, Polonius really is a little bit of the old fool, the last generation parent giving advice to his, you know, Hamlet's more like an alienated college kid. He's giving it to his daughter. Polonius's advice updated. It's a few, 3, 4 stanzas. Try not to, by the way, it comes from telling my daughter when she went to Europe to study one summer at Oxford and called me in the middle of the summer that she was in a squat in London. She was so excited. But I told her only one piece of advice a father should absolutely give. Don't take any packages across any borders. That was the advice I gave her, and it's in this poem. Polonius's advice updated. Try not to owe anything to anyone, kiddo. If you don't pay it back, they'll probably kick your ass one way or another, if they're big enough. And consider they already have more money than you, so there won't be a problem finding somebody who is big enough. Don't have sex with anyone you can't name. If you're pissed or stoned, don't try to remember anyone's name until you're not. I don't give a damn if you want to. Come to think of it, vulnerable one, don't have sex at all. But if you must, use protection, even if you believe your partner. Don't be too happy. Someone will always try to take it away. People always want somebody else's happiness. They don't understand how to get their own, and they don't want to work for it. You can't work for happiness anyway. That kills it. You have to be there when it comes. That brings me to drugs. Above all, don't carry drugs across borders for yourself or anyone. Despise anyone who asks you to. They really don't have your best interests at heart, no matter how good it feels to be loved. Shun importance of any kind that leads to nothing that helps. And credit cards suck. Trust me, they do. They're worse than drugs. So it boils down to this. You can't trust people. You can't trust yourself. Both of those can go on for a very long time, maybe a lifetime. If there's no way to avoid it, stay glued to your cell phone and don't leave home, which would be a shame because I really want grandchildren to tell this to. Yes, a little joke.
That's great.
I can end with 2 short poems, but that's not too many.
No, it's not too many.
The one is a sideways homage to Sam, and indirectly you'll get that because it's just been published, endless. Zhuangzi tells us, Confucius saw a beggar catching a line of cicadas, we say. But Zhuangzi tells us Confucius saw a beggar catching a line of cicadas, one by one on a stick. He learned this, he said, by imitating a tree for many months. The body learns stiffness while the mind wanders. Words want to be stiff in a poem, exact, the way we want to be in love, the way we wish at certain moments all things would be in the midst of their flowing beyond our life. Technique is not salvation, though you long for it to be. And on a thoroughly positive note, poem that's coming out, I worked on many years to get it right. The Invisible Smell of the Sea. It's coming out in this interesting journal, Humana Obscura, which doesn't center the human, centers the natural world, animal world. The Invisible Smell of the Sea, for Jay. Thinking doesn't do much good on a January morning, too cold for thought or any memory that does not warm the soul. Body left reckoning on its own, how best to preserve a cage of heat inside a jacket that is not waterproof, not truly in this cutting wind. A gull carrying half a clamshell comes hopping by, its clumsy wings tucked in and out in a weird dance for balance, because even the birds find this wind strange. The smells that blow from the water don't fit the day, as if some stage carpenter has gotten something wrong, a measurement displaced by an absence, a miscalculation of circumstance beyond the mind's control. Breathe salt from all directions. Be the tip of every wave. Thank you for the chance to read all that.
So lovely, Stan.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful poems.
Well, you're very nice. You do this beautifully. Everybody knows that you're a wonderful host. Thank you for the opportunity.
I'm going to open it up in just a moment and make it to where you can unmute yourselves to say hello. So please don't take off. I have a couple of things I want to say. And I haven't really prepared them, and it kind of riffs off of what Stan was saying a bit ago about him supporting my letterpress work. He admitted me into the Rainier Writing Workshop, or at PLU. One of my conditions of wherever I went, they had to accept my letterpress piece. And Stan supported that 100% in many, many different ways. What I want to say, I was designing the ads for Poets and Writers and some of those different things for our publications, the broadsides, some other things, but also because of who he is and a very generous advocate. I was getting more support from Stan than many other realms in my life. And I don't know that I would have continued on at that point with letterpress, but for Stan being my champion. And he is hands down one of the most influential people that I've had for my creative self. And that was, I mean, my dad passed, and then Sam passed, and Sam had given me the letterpress that he started Copper Canyon Press with. But Stan, you have done so much for me, and I just want to thank you. And this is just a small piece. Your writing deserves so much more than this little series.
I have 10,000 more while you hang up.
So we'll get them there. We'll get them read. But I just want to say thank you, dear heart. Just thank you. You've mentored all kinds of people, and it continues to resonate through the world in beautiful ways. And some of them are here tonight, and some of them, are just skyrocketing on their way because of you, and of course of Judith too. But I just wanted to acknowledge that.
What you just said is one of the many things I'm gifted to receive, sometimes for her, just to receive people saying that kind of thing, and also just reveling in what they do, which I don't think we did, but the atmosphere we set up was precisely so they could exceed themselves or find things to do. And you were a joy. I had that. You're one of the happiest things about the program, is what I already said. I had the idea of bringing you in, that this would happen.
No, it was absolutely wonderful. I want to open it up for everybody. So I want to say a couple of things. We have Angela Narcisco Torres, a poet. She will be with us 2 weeks from now. We're shifting to it every other week. May is going to be slightly wonky, but we'll see you through it. It's not going to be every other week because of the Sam Hamill reading, and I'm taking Mother's Day off. We're not having a reading this day. I'm holding that out to hopefully spend time with my kids. So Angela Narcisco Torres, I'm probably butchering her name, April 25th. And then we have the Sam Hamill reading, tribute reading. That's May 16th. And then there'll be a treat. Alexis Bernot, who is a translator and translated some of Sam's work. He's dual citizen, but he's in France, a wonderful poet and human. He is on May 30th. So we have some exciting things coming up. And now I will click the magic button so you are no longer muted. Or you have the option of unmuting yourself. I'm not unmuting you. You still have to click your own button.
Anybody asks me a question, I'll give a short response, believe it or not. And if you want to say anything, fine.
This is our after party. So we do this intentionally so everybody can say hello, especially in times of COVID. So now you are able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks for everybody's patience and hearing me out.
Anybody want to say hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Stan, how are you?
Hey, long time no see, except
on Facebook.
Running into you in Rochester. Yeah.
Wonderful show, Stan. I loved it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming, Joel.
This is my first time. How do I join this great exotic group?
You can follow the Writing for Peace Facebook page, and you will get the events. You'll see the events there.
Very good.
Well, I'll hop on to say what a pleasure.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
One of the other great joys from our program.
Well, I'll just say what a joy it is to hear you read your poems so often. I mean, I think if we look at the audience here, it's a testament to what you created as an educator as a creative, and such a beautiful impact. But so often, because you were so busy supporting other people's work, we didn't get to hear yours. So it's so lovely
Thank you.
to hear that, and to also just hear the thoughts and the process behind that. And obviously everything, as you talked, everything from talking about comparing Robert Bly's prose poems to talking about jazz to like, it's all the Stan Rubin stuff that I really
All
love.
this
So thank
stuff.
you
And
so much.
I realized that everybody I cited were probably all males, but trust me, there's tons of women of all kinds of backgrounds who matter to me. Naomi Shihab Nye is a dear old friend. When we met her, she had one book from a publisher who'd gone defunct, and we published her in Judy's chapbook series. And then she wanted us to do her next book, but we sent her over to Al Poulin at BOA. And I keep in touch with her. Wonderful person, and there's many, many women I value enormously personally who are writers, but I noticed the ones I read, I don't think I read one. So there is that.
We're not keeping track.
No, I know,
We're
but
doing it.
I don't like the way contemporary academia does keep tabs on you. It's extremely inimical to every value I have. People shouldn't tell you what to say or think if you're learning to think. But I felt the need to say that because there's a large number of women personally and then whose work I deeply admire and draw on. And, you know, Louise Bogan from an earlier time, one of the few women when I was young who was admitted into the circle of, there's a recent edition of her beautifully titled The Blue Estuaries. They're rhyming things, but they're really sharp, hard, and some of them go very deep. You know?
Yes.
There's a line I use as an epigraph in a collection right now. It's just something like, I did not wake when you called. I had tears to say.
Mm.
It's pretty great. She's wonderful. I have Ada Limon here. I have tons of women here, but I dip into them. When I dip into the Asian or Zen poets, they do tend to be males. What can I tell you about that? So.
I was once paid for a graphic arts project with a collection of her poems.
Good.
Yes.
She's sort of coming back a little. I mean, I lived long enough and to understand things come and go, and you'll see that everybody sees it in their lifetime. I always hope that people in MFA programs or undergraduates, since anthologies aren't that important as they once were, that's how you got your immortality. My ex-colleague Al Poulin, who founded BOA, did that major anthology. It was in print forever to highlight many poems by a few poets and who they are and all that. That doesn't really work that way now. There's tons of different kinds of everything. But I hope there are some poets that students will know. That students will know that maybe they don't, because wonderful, inspiring ones fall away. Great artists fall away. They come back maybe sometime. So.
I have Michelle. Michelle, I'm not sure if I'm going to say your last name. Is it Bongsek? Okay. Stan, this was beautiful. Sorry to be late. I echo what Juniper said. So amazingly grateful to have you in this life all these years.
Michelle, I love her. She's somebody from my other life when I was teaching masters and undergraduates. And she's going on to be a fabulous poet and teacher herself. So hello, Michelle.
Yes, it's fun. It's fun watching all of our publications. Jenny Nevis, she said,
You know her?
Sending a quiet hello. I got to meet her. Ian introduced us at a residency, I think. I'm with babies sleeping. And then she said, let Stan know I'm delighted to hear him. So she can't talk her time. She's taking care of the babes. So,
she's a whole different kind of writer from any of us, and her book that just came out is a wonderful, wonderful read. She's got delicious, ironic sensibility while telling you important things about farming, nature, kids, animals, growing up with strange, interesting parents on a farm in Maine. I highly recommend her book to you.
Yes, checking it out. Anybody else want to say hello? You don't have to show your face. You can just say hello and not show your face.
I'm just showing you this to prove something.
Love of Orcus.
This is for love of Orcus. Some of you know Wandering Angus Press. they're doing a second book by our wonderful graduate, Jerry McFadden. And this collection, For Love of Orcas, an anthology of poems about the orcas, inspired by one you may know of. A mother had a stillbirth in
Yes.
the Sound. And it has a wonderful collection. I didn't know what it was going to be, of writers mainly from the Northwest. And it won a prize. It won a national prize from the Nautilus organization. Best anthology of that year. So I salute Jill Johnson and that whole crew over there. See, I found it. I'm not going to read you the poem now.
Yes. That's okay. That's okay. Anybody else want to say hello?
I'll say hi.
Gail, how are you?
I'm great. I had to get my dinner. We have a family Zoom coming up. Stan, that was great. And I'm just about out of quarantine, so I can't wait till we go to the...
get together. They'll open up the winery down there.
Yeah. Yeah, we're ready. Stan and I meet and look at poems, and he's great. Love it. Love his conversations.
Well,
And I love these poems you read tonight.
Thank you. Needless to say, just as a teacherly or something observation, I picked things that I thought I could say. I love saying them in different voices, ventriloquist or changing the tone slightly and all that. But I picked ones that I thought I could do. I have quite a few like it, but I also have others that I think need the page, to realize their complexity. So yeah, let's meet. I haven't seen you for a million years now.
A year. It's been a year. I've been good. And yet I was the 38th case of COVID in the county.
And I know I'm not giving away your life, but I know you have some vulnerability to exactly
Oh,
that.
yeah. And I just didn't go anywhere. We Cloroxed all our mail. And I still got it. But I'm doing great. So that was good.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thanks for coming. Anybody else want to say hello before we close it out?
It was great to say hello, Ian, if you're still watching. Thank you. You are
Ian said I have to duck out. 10,000 vows for this beautiful reading, Stan. Hope to see you in Port Townsend this summer.
He's that reading with him the other. I wanted individuals. You all are. And boy, is he an individual and a half in all that he does.
Yes.
The diversity of people was amazing.
I was trying to get the conversation to save so I could give you a copy. It says, this is from Sydney. I'll never forget Stan's 2-hour phone conversation with me to offer a place at RWW. He may be the only program director in the world who spent that much time to convince a writer that the right place for her is Rainier. Thank you for sharing that, Sydney. Yes.
I did that, which many people share. They said the thing they had in common was long calls with me, but we were a brand new program and we wanted special people. We didn't just want every kid who wanted an MFA or even every accomplished writer who wanted one to be able to teach. So I realized if somebody sounded right, I wanted to learn who they are. And I had many long, wonderful conversations.
Yeah, I called it the sweaty ear conversation.
Yeah, they knew it. I had one with somebody. I don't think it was Sydney. It was a guy. I talked with him through several states. He was driving back home to the upper Midwest. And we started the conversation somewhere in the Middle Eastern Atlantic states. And I talked to him all the way till he was back in his home state. And
that's pretty funny. Was that Carl? Carl Lehman?
Probably.
Yeah, he does a lot of road trips.
He's in North Dakota or South Dakota. I don't know if it was him. It might have been someone else from Minnesota.
Yes. Yeah.
But Journey Herbeck or someone, I can't remember.
Yes, Journey has a book out too.
And the music people brought, of which Ian was a late star in that. Keep the music thing going was great.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Stan.
You all.
Dear Stan, this just amazing poems.
I love the opportunity. I don't get a lot of chance to read like that. And I appreciate it a lot because we all know that if you have an upcoming reading, it makes you look at your work with a whole different eye and interest and ear and make some sorting out and all that's very useful. So I appreciate that too. Thank you all. Thank you all. Many friends here, many friends from many different parts of my life.
Mhm.
Very nice.
So one last ask. It's about 6:16. Anybody else want to say hello? Okie dokie. So we'll call it a night, and I'll call you, Stan. Probably not tonight. I got to take care of some things.
You
But I'll call
better
you.
get some sleep too. All you
Yes,
guys.
yeah, that too. But we'll talk.
The good work you do, I admire the heck out of that too.
Thank
So,
you. We'll talk soon, and take good care, everybody. It was lovely to see everyone here.
everybody up here in, sunny Port Townsend, where we have like palm trees swaying in the breeze and so forth. Bye-bye, all. Love.
Mhm. Take good care.